welcome to the Dine 16, a food podcast about Sacramento. And this is part 2 of my conversation with the executive chef of Canon in East Sac, Brad Cecchi. Now, if this just popped into your feed or someone sent it to you, take the time, go back to last week's episode and listen to the first half of our conversation, where we talk about Chef Cecchi's early career all the way up until he worked for a Michelin-starred restaurant called Soul Bar in the Napa Valley. Now, really quick, if you're a loyal listener to this show, I apologize for not having this episode out on Tuesday. So here's the deal. All 3 of my kids were sick and had to stay home from school. Now, they're all fine. We took a bunch of COVID tests. Everybody's good. But in this age of COVID and parenting, everything's more complicated. So if your kids are kind of sick and coughing and you know it's just a cold, you do the test. Even so, it's best to keep them home. So they stayed home, and I spent most of the day watching them instead of editing this podcast. Then, as I was getting ready to finish it on Wednesday, after I recorded this voiceover, I dropped my laptop and broke the connector to the external hard drive that I use, which has all these other bits and pieces of the podcast that I need. So I had to rebuild the entire thing. Anyway, that's the reason it's out on Thursday. Those are my excuses. The podcast will come out from now on Tuesdays. Next week, there'll be a new episode Tuesday morning. But that's what happened, in case you were wondering. Anyhow, moving on. We left off with Chef Cecchi right as he was about to get a call from his soon-to-be business partner, Clay Nutting. And we jumped right in when he got that call and made the decision to move back to Sacramento to start a whole new chapter. All right, so you're at Soul Bar, and then had you been thinking about moving on? Had you been thinking about coming back home, or was this just another thing where an opportunity presented itself in Sacramento and you thought, that could be fun?
Yeah, I think after I didn't get the job at the Citizen, I knew that I had to leave the market to grow to a place. So from then it was like, I'm always coming back to Sacramento. Like, it was never like I'm leaving and never coming back. So it was, for me, it was like, how do I ascend to a position where I can do what I want to do in my hometown?
Yeah, you can have one of those chef-owned restaurants you were talking about.
Or even like one of the hotels or whatever, right? Like whatever opportunities come my way. And so that was the plan. And my wife and I were just boyfriend, girlfriend when we moved to Cleveland. And so we had moved back to Napa. We'd gotten married. We were headed towards the family, and our daughter's 4.5 now. Mm-hmm. But we had to figure that out as well. And we knew we didn't. Napa was too expensive, and I was working a ton. And up in Calistoga, we were living in downtown Napa. So I didn't know what the move was going to be. I had at one point came to town and walked around town with the developers of the Sawyer, long before they even broke ground on the hotel. So things like that happened. And so Clay called and he was like, hey, and looking back on it, I probably should have been more prepared. But as I was interviewing for the job in Cleveland, I was also talking to Clay and his then business partner from Lowbrow about being the chef of Lowbrow and Block Butcher Bar, and decided to take the job in Cleveland instead. So that's how Clay and I met, was through the interview process for Block and Lowbrow. Okay. And so he had kind of always kept in touch a little bit, just commenting on some Facebook notifications or Instagram or whatever. And then he reached out and he said, hey, I have a new opportunity of starting by myself, starting to start a new restaurant concept. Would you consider meeting about being the chef and potentially a partner? And I said, sure, take any meeting. Yeah. So he drove up to Napa and we had lunch and he kind of laid it out. He's like, I have the opportunity of this space. It's kind of a B location, old warehouse district in East Sac. And I said, okay, well, let me take a look at it. And he wanted to do kind of like a small plates, shareable, very tavern-y kind of feeling place. And I was like, I have a couple ideas. And so I kind of laid out what I thought a menu could look like. And so we moved forward. And it was about a year of raising money and figuring out the business plan and all of this stuff. And so finally, I think about January, February 2017, we had kind of achieved the goals, fundraising and stuff. And so I quit my job and we moved, my wife and I, my pregnant wife and I moved in with my sister and put some pop-ups together and got the place built and opened. And it was on a razor's edge, we didn't really have it quite together. I left my great paying job and my wife's great paying job in Napa and took the chance. Clay and I ended up become 50-50 partners in everything we do. And so, but it wasn't like that always, and he had success at Lowbrow.
Right.
But I had no ownership experience whatsoever. And so, and when you're in hotels, you're insulated from all that stuff. You're looking at margins, you're looking at percentages, and you're looking at, but you're never looking at cash flow, how much money is in your bank account.
Right. Yeah.
And so that was a struggle, We were very busy. We opened up to a lot of, great reviews and great press. But it was I had no idea. So it was a hard couple of years there. But, we're better for it.
Yeah, absolutely.
So, yeah, it was nuts.
So food-wise, tell people a little bit about the concept of Canon and how maybe it's evolved a little bit over the years. You said you're just about to hit a 5-year anniversary.
5-year anniversary, yeah. So Canon opened. We opened as we were going to do these shareable small plates. And we had a great idea of what that would look like and how people would eat it. So my always thought with Sacramento was that we have great restaurants here. We have great agriculture here. Mm-hmm. But I felt like a lot of our restaurants lived in this Franco-Mediterranean American world. And that's great. But I wasn't going to open another restaurant like that in Sacramento. Yeah. And so what my idea was to use the bounty of ingredients that we have here in Sacramento, but couple that with, intentionally, the canon of international ingredients.
Okay.
Right? So taking inspiration from the Middle East and Southeast Asia and China and Russia and Australia and South America and Latin countries and all that stuff, right? Take the ingredients that they've developed over thousands of years and apply them to what bounty we have here and apply it in a way that was contemporary in the eating style that people were doing. So Canon evolved into kind of this family style restaurant, right? Our plates aren't small anymore. And we've really leaned into vegetables the center of the plate.
Yeah.
And really creating dishes around seasonality, but not necessarily only focusing on everything coming from within 100 miles of us, right?
Okay.
Focusing on the raw ingredients coming from within 100 miles of us, but using olive oils from France or Italy or Spain if we needed to, if it fit the dish, if it made the dish better. Taking methods of cooking from the garums of ancient Rome and fish sauce from Southeast Asia and making our own koji from rice farmed right here in the Delta or Butte County, and then making interesting fish sauces.
Yeah.
Or misos or fermenting or pickling or, but using local ingredients, but really developing technique and ingredients from other places and seeing how that affects our local bounty.
Yeah.
So that's what Canon's all about. We love the idea of making everything from scratch. We love the idea of being able to control and manipulate ingredients to our way of doing things. And it opens up a lot of doors for us. And I know a lot of people do that stuff now. So it's not it's not a unique process. I think we've just been at it a little longer than most. Mm-hmm. We started doing it 5 years ago, where I think is the last 2 or 3 years during the pandemic, people really had a chance to learn these techniques.
Yeah.
We've been doing them. And so when the pandemic hit, we had a fridge full of stuff that we were able to preserve into some really cool stuff.
Yeah.
That we're just starting to see the fruits of now.
That's cool.
Which is awesome.
Yeah. Fermentation and bread starter, two of the pandemic food cliches,
yeah, totally.
For sure, right?
Totally.
So I want to talk for a minute about vegetables because you mentioned how vegetable focused Canon is and Sacramento has so much good produce, and we're probably about the same age, or I know we're about the same age. So I certainly grew up like in the 80s. I consider my parents pretty good cooks, but when it came to vegetables, it was like steamer basket,
Right.
and that's it.
Yep.
I never had a grilled vegetable. I never had a roasted vegetable my entire life. I mean, my wife and I, you know, when we got together and started cooking, we would roast vegetables. And I remember I cooked for my mom and roasted some just like broccoli. I mean, just simple, right? Just roasted with some olive oil and salt and pepper in the oven. And she was like, this is amazing. And I was like, yeah, broccoli and cauliflower are a lot better when you cook them not just in a steamer basket.
Yeah.
So, tell me about learning really how to cook vegetables and how to be able to, you know, create almost, you know, plant-based is kind of a buzzword, but like really plant-based dishes as well that are focused on just cooking vegetables well rather than other tricks or things like that.
I really like what I like about cooking is thinking of it as you would any other thing, right? As a science, as a constructible object, using that knowledge of cellular structure, mass, heat versus mass, when to cook things fast, when to cook things slow, when to cook things hard, when to cook them easy, when to burn them, when not to burn them, how to develop flavor on that, whether it's using sugar to create a Maillard, you know, like all of that science is what I really enjoy about cooking. And so applying that to vegetables, because we apply it to meat because we care.
Yeah.
Right? We apply it to fish because we care. We're like, okay, cool, we got to sear this steak. We're going to put grill marks on it, and we're going to cook it medium rare. And the crust on the outside is going to be developed from coarse ground pepper and flaky salt. And when we cook it in a cast iron pan, it's going to develop a thick crust. Well, why can't we do that with a mushroom or with cauliflower? Apply those center of the plate focused cooking things instead of, because even in restaurants and kitchens where we might have been roasting vegetables, we were still marinating the steaks and the chickens, and we were still smoking them, and we were still cooking them on the grill or searing them and basting them in butter when the fish came out of the oven. We were doing all that stuff because we cared. And then we would saute the Brussels sprouts with a little bit of bacon and put it on a plate.
Yeah.
That's great. It's delicious. People still do it. It's awesome. But for me, I wanted to do something different. And so we do a whole roasted cauliflower at Canon right now. And it's got to be cooked without the fan for a little while so that it doesn't burn on the outside. And then it's got to get cooked hotter with the fan on so that it creates a crust on the outside. We marinate it. We season it up a couple days ahead of time. So we treat those things like center of the plate items. And I'm not a vegetarian. In fact, I'm a proponent of meat, right? But like, I think that food deserves the attention no matter what avenue you're in.
Sure.
And so I find it very easy to create vegetarian and vegan items because I think that the best things come from tighter lines. If I have to color inside tight lines, then you're going to create a better picture. If I'm given the whole gamut, it's hard to draw, right? It's easier to color.
That's right.
So I think that like we live in this bounty in this region, especially with the way that things are going with price and cost and availability and supply chain shortages. Like we have what we have close by. And so in order to use it and to create value for people, because we sell like half a head of cabbage at Canon for like $15.
Yeah.
We all know how much cabbage costs. Even if it's expensive cabbage, it doesn't cost that.
Right.
But like we make miso from scratch, from rice from Butte County, and we turn it into a shio, and we marinate the cabbage in it for 2 days, and then we sear the cabbage and roast the cabbage, and then we serve it with like a mushroom amino paste. And so we create these flavors around it and to make it all vegan. And so, but it tastes like barbecue.
Yeah.
And so that's where the value is too, right? It's like we are creating the value and adding it to that quarter head or half a head of cabbage. And that's just the way our business is built. And that's what Canon does.
Yeah.
And I have another restaurant that doesn't do that, right? That we just blanch asparagus and put sauce scribiche over the top and breadcrumbs. And that's what that is. So it's not good or bad or one way or the other. I'm not saying that it is. I'm just saying that like Canon chooses to treat vegetables very intentionally and with a lot of, and fruits too, applying different techniques to fruits in order to allow us to manipulate them.
Yeah. Cool. So let's talk a little bit about the pandemic, because you guys were just 3 years old when the pandemic hit. So we're, who even knows where we are in it at this point.
Seriously.
But yeah, how did you guys survive? And then, we'll just start there. What did you guys do to pivot to try to even keep the doors open or keep food going out the doors when you were closed?
Yeah, so I'll just start from the beginning. So we had our last brunch service was Sunday, March 12th, I think. We had word that we were going to get shut down and that people were going to be ordered to shelter in place and what the rules around that were going to be. So Monday night, the 13th, I think, we met at Canon. And it was like some people from the Sac City Unified School District, people from UC Davis Med Center, myself, Deneb Williams from Alora, Patrick Mulvaney, my business partner Clay, Santana Diaz. And we were like, what are we going to do here? We don't have an option. We can't just close the doors and not know what the future holds and lose our businesses. And so we asked the hospital system and we asked the school system, what do you guys need? Because you can't staff your large commissary kitchens with a whole bunch of people. So they were like, well, we could use some meals. And, the schools are closing. So like these kids that are low income families, they're going to need food. And they eat at least one, if not two of those meals at school every day. Elderly people can't leave their houses. So where are they going to eat? And so we ended up coming up with the framework of what became Family Meal Sacramento. Mm-hmm. And so the days after that kind of involved whiteboard markers on glass windows. It felt very much like a startup type feel of us saying, okay, cool. Like what are our control points here? We knew how to cook food. We had the staff. What we didn't have was we didn't have any money, and we didn't have a way to get the food from our restaurants to the people. And we also didn't have a way to ensure that when we got to where we were going, that there would be people there waiting to receive the food.
Yeah.
As crazy as that sounds, like you just didn't know. People didn't know where to go to get food.
Right.
And so those were the things we had to figure out. And so Mulvaney's and Canon, we pro bono tested this program. We took our meals to Swanson Community Center, part of the Mission Oaks Recreation Park District. They just spread the word through the community that we were going to drop food off on these days. And then Mulvaney's took meals to one of the churches downtown and then the Roberts Family Foundation also. And we just did it. We were cleaning out our walk-ins and we just took food to people. And then, but along the way, we budgeted it. We costed it. We did all the work on like the administrative side. We had a film crew follow us and film it. And then we started looking for private money, in ways that was like, cool, you buy your to-go burger at Canon and, add $2 to support Family Meal, or buy a burger at Canon and buy one for somebody else. Those kinds of programs came up early on in the pandemic, and it got us a couple $1,000 down the road, and it allowed us to keep going. Then we had a proof of concept, and so we were able to take that to the city of Sacramento, who had, I want to say, like 1,000 elderly residents in SHRA community housing, like the housing projects.
Okay.
That were being told, do not leave your house. You cannot go out and get groceries. You can't go out and get dinner. You can't, you need to stay inside. You're very at risk, and we don't want anybody dying. And so the city came to us and said, can you help us facilitate this program? So we brought on 5 restaurants total: Canon, Mulvaney's, Alora, Camden Spit Larder, and Bencho Yaki. And we started Family Meal Sacramento. And so we had, we each did like 200 meals twice a week. And they got distributed through the communities. We would drop them off at the individual project housing places, and they would get distributed. That program evolved into what became Great Plates California. Great Plates fed, like 20 million people over the course of the pandemic, over the course of a year, and saved countless restaurants. I think in Sacramento alone, we had upwards of like 30 restaurants participating in Great Plates. We still to this day have about 25 restaurants participating in Family Meal Sacramento still. Program's still up and running. We feed school kids. We feed quarantined individuals. We feed elderly still. We feed just low-income families who need the assistance. And we just really identified in that moment that food insecurity was a real issue. And what Family Meal did is it mobilized independent restaurants as small commissaries at a time when people could not gather together. Mm-hmm. We knew we had people who could create. We knew we had people that could cook. And so we just put them to work.
Yeah.
And we kept them working throughout the, like Canon did not lose a single employee during the pandemic.
Wow. That's awesome.
So that was our move, and it worked.
So as Chef Cecchi said, that's how Canon and many other restaurants in Sacramento managed to survive, by actually using their skills and talents to help those in need. During the early parts of the pandemic, Chef Cecchi said it was wild. They were donated hundreds of pounds of lamb vindaloo. At one point, Chef Juan Barajas in Woodland was going out to the asparagus fields because there was no workers to go out and harvest the asparagus, and he just started clipping it and dropping it off at restaurants around Sacramento because otherwise it was going to go bad and couldn't be used. And they took all this raw product and made meals to give to people for free, while the grant money and private donations raised helped them pay their staff and keep their restaurants running. Chef Cecchi said not only was it a great way to put a small dent in the problem of food insecurity during the pandemic, and even continuing now, but it was also an opportunity to introduce people to the restaurant scene, as it had blossomed over the last 15 years or so. And so we jump back into the conversation to talk about the future of Sacramento and the restaurant industry, and what his hopes are moving forward, because he had seen the Sacramento restaurant scene grow, and now take a major hit from the pandemic. So he talked about what he thinks may happen moving forward, as people continue to go back out to eat, in an increasingly complicated world of trying to find staff, increased prices of goods, and other instabilities in a global economy.
I think my hope is that people continue to want to work in restaurants. I have no doubt that people want to eat at them. The foodie culture, I don't think is going anywhere.
Yeah.
But we have to be able to staff them. And frankly, what we're seeing a lot in pretty much any industry is that people found a way to not quite work so hard during the pandemic. And so restaurant work is hard.
Yeah.
And I think it's forced the restaurant industry's hand in a very healthy direction of making sure that restaurant workers live on livable wages, that they're contributing members of the economy, that they're not abused, so to speak. Long hours, hot environments, cut yourself, get back to work, don't call in sick, come to work, throw up in a trash can,
right.
All that stuff. Everybody always got paid, right? We didn't beat anybody, but somebody would call in sick and be like, how sick are you?
Yeah.
I need you to come to work. But those moments are gone, and that's okay. So yeah, the beauty of it is that we have to tip them out, and we have to pay them better, and we have to provide benefits and retirement and all these things. But all that costs money, you know? And so what we have to understand is that the restaurant community will come back, and people will want to contribute in that, and we'll give everybody back their neighborhood restaurant and eatery. But it's going to cost a little more.
Yeah.
And that's unfortunate. And that's what I hope for, is that people love this so much that we'll figure it out. And whether it is, like I said earlier, creating value out of cheaper ingredients, maybe this is what we needed to quit eating filet mignon.
Right.
That's okay. And I think that's the direction that I'd like to see it head. I love the idea of Prop 12 in California, giving pigs the room to roam, but we have to do it the right way.
Yeah.
And so in order to do that, there has to be public-private partnerships and all of that. Whether we create the law or not, we still have to be able to support the pork farmers, and we have to be able to afford the pork. And so however that looks, I think will change the face of the restaurant community, right? What we serve will matter. Or you're going to pay $75 for 8-ounce filet mignon.
Right.
Or you can get, a hoof braised, but it can still be delicious, right? Like a beef shank can be delicious. And so we just have to adjust our palates a little bit and trust that chefs are going to push us in the right direction. So I don't know. Those are my dreams.
Yeah.
We still have very inspired people that work for us at Canon. And I'm thankful for them every day. Franquette's the same way, So like restaurants aren't going to go anywhere.
Sure.
Like some of them will fail and new ones will spring up and people will go eat at them.
Yeah.
It will all change. And one day we'll all be really comfortable going back out to restaurants.
Right.
So I hope that's the direction we head into.
Yeah.
But these are new times.
Yeah, it is.
It's like we came out of this, I don't even know, we're out of the pandemic, right? But like we came into a place where we all would go back out to eat. Canon's been very busy the last year. And that was great. And then now Russia and Ukraine are at war.
Yeah.
And the country that grows 30% of the world's wheat did not plant wheat this year because they're being invaded by a foreign power. And so the price of wheat is going to go up for everybody.
Right.
Gas prices, well, like all those things are impacting everybody's bottom line. The everyday consumer has less money. The everyday business person has to kick that down the road.
Yeah.
And so it'll all level out. I'm sure it always does. We just have to be understanding of what everybody's going through.
So tell me a little bit about Franquette, both in the fare that you guys serve, but also the decision to, open a spot in West Sacramento. But tell me a little bit about the decision to open Franquette.
So it was Clay and I mean, we built our business at Canon to grow. Canon was never supposed to be the only restaurant that we ever owned.
Yeah.
And so while I was doing a little bit of contract work for Fulcrum, the developers in West Sac, pre-pandemic.
Okay.
And they had this, it's called The Block, is the apartment building that Franquette is in. And they had a little space there, and we were talking to them about helping them interview Temple and Camellia coffee shops to do, because that neighborhood needed just neighborhood coffee.
Yeah.
Right? Something for the residents to get a cup of coffee on their way to work. So I was kind of reviewing contracts with them and talking to them about it. And I was like, I have an idea. It could have a little higher revenue than a normal coffee shop just because of the hours of operation. And I said, well, what about a European style cafe? Because in Europe, right, there's one of these cafes kind of every couple of blocks where you get your breakfast there in the morning, you maybe grab a sandwich there at lunchtime, you finish your day there with a glass of wine or some kind of like small tapas or something. And they exist all over Europe in every old neighborhood. And so it felt like that's what that neighborhood needed, because the Bridge District is like growing out of the ground, essentially. They're high net worth individuals that live over there. Like they have disposable income. They're generally smaller families. And so the idea of having a cafe that wasn't just coffee, but also can transition to wine and good food, and I think was attractive to Fulcrum. And so I kind of pitched the idea, and then it just kind of steamrolled. Like they were like, we love this. Let's move forward to the next thing. We're like, we don't have any money. It's the middle of a pandemic. So they were like, well, let's be partners. I said, okay, well, that sounds great. So we were able to make that all work. And then we developed the concept. But originally, we were going to kind of try to do something a little more Italian in Avenue because of the coffee component. French coffee has a stigma of being kind of burnt tasting and over roasted. But then there's something called the third wave of coffee that happened in Paris in like the early 2000s that created this coffee culture within France. Okay. And so we kind of leaned into that, more of a contemporary, not this checkerboard floor French cafe with like little wire chairs on a sidewalk. We leaned into a more contemporary version of what was happening in France at the time. And Elena and Jack, Elena's our executive chef over there, and her husband Jack is our GM at Canon. Mm-hmm. They had lived in Paris prior to working at Canon. And so they had a little bit of French influence to bring to the table. We knew that Elena was going to be the chef there, and we knew that Jack was going to kind of manage the beverage program alongside Canon's there. And so we kind of leaned into the French theme, and we're able to build this little cafe. And I found it to be very inspiring, having a place like that.
Yeah.
And Clay and I are invested in West Sacramento. I think, we have Canon and East Sac, but like West Sac is a real chance for Sacramento to have a riverfront that isn't old Sac,
Right.
like, because the rest of the riverfront has I-5 in front of it. So, it's a real opportunity for Sacramento to have a walkable, livable riverfront. And we're believers. And so we opened a business over there, and we're big proponents and partners with Fulcrum on whatever it is that they want to do there. So as it develops, I think it will become kind of like the Brooklyn to Sacramento's Manhattan.
Okay.
Like,
yeah.
I have that feeling. Like, it feels a little more hip. It feels a little more contemporary. The new construction is going to feel way newer. And we're just across the river. And yeah, I mean, there's a bunch of stuff on the horizon over there, and I think it's going to be awesome.
Cool.
So, and Franquette's cool. I really enjoy, like I said, I'm very inspired by what we do there. We don't have like a full kitchen. There's no hood. It's just like an oven and a couple induction burners, and we do great salads, and we have an awesome cheese program. Small plates at dinner are really inventive and creative, but still very like contemporary French. We're making our own pastries. The croissants sell out quick every day. And then just like a simple lunch, like nice entree salads and baguette sandwiches and soup. And it's a little 1,300 square feet. We don't take reservations. It's just walk in, have a good time, leave. Like, take your coffee to go.
Right.
Whatever. Sit on a sidewalk and enjoy.
Cool.
So, yeah, I'd love to have 1,000 of them.
Yeah.
I think that it's that kind of place,
That's great.
Yeah.
All right. I did want to ask you, we'll do one last question, then we'll jump into a couple of rapid fire questions, but you mentioned your daughter's 4.5. I'm a dad. I have 3 kids that are 7 and twins that are 4. So you work in a very grueling industry, being a business owner and a chef. How has that changed, and how have you tried to sort of make it all work?
Yeah, so my daughter was born the day before Canon opened.
Man.
Yeah, that was rough. So the first year was something that my wife and I just try not to talk about.
Sure.
It was a bad situation. But we both understood that, like, fortunately, we own this business.
Yeah, right.
It's not going anywhere. She's not going anywhere. So we are going to have to figure out how to tag team this together. And it just was a lot of sleepless nights and, a lot of work and a lot of being tired. And the silver lining, and I think for a lot of people this was the case, is the silver lining of the pandemic was that she was almost 3 when that happened. And I had time all of a sudden to spend at home and cook dinner and, like, be a dad. And so that was a very seesaw moment. It went from not being around very much to being around all the time and being a dad. And so as we came out of the pandemic, I had a bunch of people that worked for me that, like Elena, who is the chef at Franquette, and my chef at Canon, his name is Sean Rummery. Sean's been with us for 4 years, knows the inner workings. So now Sean runs the day-to-day at Canon, and Elena runs Franquette, and I get to be the chef at both places. But more importantly, like, I get to be home a little bit more. And that's not to say that it comes with less stress. It's just my work days are now 8 to 7 instead of 10 to midnight.
Right.
So, it changed when I have to be at the restaurants. I take Sundays off. It's just about figuring that out. And it was something that was totally new to me because I was used to just like, got to go to work, see you tomorrow.
Yeah,
like,
right.
A work day was a day.
You're right.
Literally 24 hours. Do you have to work tomorrow? Yes. Take me off your calendar.
Yeah.
And that's the way that, like, it worked with my wife and I until the second we had a baby. And now it's different, right? Like, what's your schedule look like? Well, I have this and this and this and this, and like have this time between here and there. And like, so that's kind of how it works now. And that's why it was ever so important, going back to like the Soul Bar conversation, developing administrative systems that I can manage from afar. I use technology to manage the prep list. So like, I can look at my phone and see what's on the prep list at either restaurant at any given moment. I know what orders are coming in based on the technology systems we've developed with Google Drive. So that kind of stuff has helped me spend a little more time at home and manage these restaurants to the standards that we have to have, but spend more time with my daughter and my wife. And
Yeah.
My family, my parents are aging, like all that stuff is, happening,
Yeah.
whether I like it or not.
Right.
So yeah, it's a grind, and some weeks are better than others. I opened a restaurant 6 weeks ago. I haven't been home a lot,
Sure.
but there are days on the horizon that I hope that I get to take a couple days off in a row and spend it with my kid.
Yeah.
So, and we, I'm still home for bedtime and dinner and all that stuff. I'll be home tonight.
Yeah.
But yeah, just trying to find that balance. It takes a lot. It takes a lot of effort.
It does.
So
Yeah. All right. So on to a few rapid fire questions here that are all food related. The first one is, what's your favorite cheap guilty pleasure? What's the thing you as a chef you're almost embarrassed to say?
Oh, I would never be embarrassed to love Jim Boy's tacos at the level that I do. We have a love affair. This isn't the first interview that I've said this, but like, it's my death row.
Is it?
Yeah. Like if I had to choose one last meal to eat, it's a 6-pack of extra crispy ground beef Jim Boy's tacos. No doubt.
All right. What's your favorite food movie? As a chef, what's the movie that gets it right?
Movie. That's a good question. Well, I will say that the movie Chef is kind of something that inspired me to leave hotels behind. Because I'd worked in hotels for years, and I was at Soul Bar, and I was getting crushed every day with these Michelin standards and things like that. And then Clay called me, and he's like, hey, come work at this independent restaurant. We'll just do dinner. I'm like, great. That sounds awesome. And like, we can do all this funky food that we do at Canon. So from a food movie perspective, like, I don't know that it was the food in that movie that inspired me, but like the thought that like a chef could leave this white jacket and just start wearing like a t-shirt and tennis shoes and cook cool food was really empowering to me. And so it was not the reason, but it was definitely like, oh, that's an option.
Yeah.
And so I remember that movie a lot when I think about the way that my career's taken a turn since 2017.
Okay, cool. I love that movie. What's your favorite thing to cook at home? Chefs rarely cook at home, but what are you going to throw together?
I'm a pretty epic grilled cheese sandwich maker.
Nice.
Yeah.
Back to the movie Chef, which is one of the famous scenes in that movie is about the grilled cheese.
But like, as a dad, like most of the cooking I do at home now is for my 4-year-old.
Right.
So I'm mostly on the breakfast train. I love a really well done soft scrambled. Like if I have the time to soft scramble eggs for myself, like that's something that I will take the time and consider it a leisure activity.
Yeah.
To just put soft scrambled eggs on toast. And then we have tostada night.
Okay.
It's usually on Tuesdays about once a month. And it's like a clean out the fridge moment, but I like that. I don't cook like that. Everything at Canon is so meticulously recorded to the gram so that the prep cooks can make it the right way. For me to just like open up the fridge and like cut up some things and squeeze juice and add honey and chilies and mix things together and just cook from the cuff is fun.
Yeah.
I don't get to do that so often anymore.
Does your daughter like your cooking? I know she's 4.5, so she's kind of at that age.
No, she doesn't like anything. She's 4.5.
You ever make anything that you're like, she's really going to like this? And she's just like, no.
Yeah. Like I'll feel like I'll spend the time to like butter noodles, right? But like I'll spend the time to like save the pasta water and then like reduce it so that it's starchy and then mount butter into it and like mount the parmesan, like basically make like a cacio e pepe and then like give it to her and she's like, I'll be like, how is it? She goes, she'll give me like a thumbs up and then she won't eat it. I'm like,
right.
What's going on here? And then of course then I eat it.
Yeah.
And that's why I look the way that I do.
Yeah, my kids usually decide before they've even tasted it.
Yeah.
It's just, you spend 2 hours on something and set it down. And this looks gross.
Right.
Like, will you try it? It looks gross. It's going to taste gross in their mind. And it doesn't look gross. Anyway, and what's the dish from your childhood you wish you could go back and eat? If you could go back in time and eat something that your grandpa cooked or somebody cooked, what's the thing that would bring you back?
I mean, I like the idea, and we always joke around about my grandfather's cooking that like it wasn't all that great. But he used to make a potato and like bacon chowder. Was like one of the soups that he made, and it'd always be in the fridge or something. And so we try to make it like my parents come over for Christmas, and we don't do like a big Christmas dinner. Like we'll literally make a pot of this soup and like get a loaf of great bread or make the bread and drink a couple bottles of wine, and that's our Christmas. dinner. And so that pot of soup, like I would wish that like I could just talk about that soup with him as he's making it.
Yeah.
Because it's something, it's just like milk and flour. Like it's not like a great soup, right? It's just like milk and flour and bacon and potatoes. Like but like he would add Worcestershire sauce and Tabasco and, like stuff he would put in there. And he'd always like, he didn't have a recipe. He just did it from the cup, so like that is something that I remember that every time I make that soup, I know that I'm making it better than he made it. Like I have to be, right? Like I have all this student loan debt and I have all this time that I spend in kitchens. Like I have to be making this soup better than he made it. But in my mind, like his is the best.
Yeah.
Right. And like I would just love to be able to like have that conversation with him over the stove as he was making it.
Cool. Right on. Well, Chef Cecchi, thank you so much for coming in and being here today. It's really a pleasure to talk to you.
Thank you for having me. It's a pleasure.
Thanks for listening to this episode of the Dine 16. If you happen to listen to this one and you haven't heard part 1, just go back in your podcast feed or go to our website and check out part 1 where we hear about Chef Cecchi's early career and learn about what it's like to go for a Michelin star. If you like this episode, please subscribe wherever you listen to podcasts. And if you want, take the time to give it a positive review. It'll help more people find the show. Or even better, just let some friends and family know. Tell them to listen. Hey, there's a new food podcast all about Sacramento. Check it out. Follow me on Twitter and Instagram. Both handles are @Dine16. And if you have ideas, or you have guests you want to hear on the show, or you want to reach out, shoot me an email at max@dine16.com. You can find more information about us or listen to the episodes right on our website, which is just dine16.com. The opening and closing theme music are by my brother-in-law, Mark Owens. The Dine 16 is a production of the Hear Me Now studio in Citrus Heights. Next Tuesday, we're going to switch gears a little bit and still talk about food, but talk about something related to food that is a favorite pastime of so many of us. And that's after we cook or when we go out to eat, taking pictures of it and putting it on Instagram. My guest will be Taylor Gillespie, who's a local food photographer, and she'll talk all about how to take great pictures of food, and we'll talk about the Sacramento food scene as well. So until then, as always, eat something you love with someone you love.